conference in compliance with Governor Cuomo's executive orders, which suspend certain provisions of the open meetings law to allow municipal boards to convene meetings via video conferencing without in-person attendance by the public. In addition, the public has been provided with the ability to view, hear, and participate in the meeting. A transcript will be provided at a later date. I determined that there's a quorum of board members for the meeting. The link to the live stream of the meeting has been provided to the public, and a video of the meeting will be made available on public access television as well as on a link with the town's website. There are no submission materials at this point. This is just a discussion, a work session. So let's call the special meeting of Thursday, March 18th to order. And the subject is moving forward with our documentation to get some memos or a memo to the town board in connection with the original form-based code. So we're a little bit behind, I guess, given the changes, but here we are. So we have received, Felicia was kind enough to send around some documents. Dick, I haven't seen your changes. Apparently you have some changes. Let me see if I can find it here. You got 75 screens. I should be able to find something. And I just sent out, and I scanned it to everyone at your town website, email address, as well as your personal ones, in case you're not on your town one right now. It was wordsmithing of the sections for the land use processing, goals, town-owned land, parking, and required retail. Some easy ones. I did not tackle anything in the architecture. I did not tackle anything in the bulk and height that Tom provided. I did not tackle anything in the affordable housing types.
Can I make a suggestion, Bob? I think it's too difficult for everybody because all of these changes came in at the last minute.
Yes.
I would very much like Felicia to combine them into one document based on further discussion tonight. Can each member who had submitted something today, talk about their changes? And then we'll do diligence to create one document to circulate after tonight's discussion.
Sure.
All right, just because it's going to be too hard for a lot of people to go back and forth. And I looked over most of the comments, and it's just a matter of incorporating them into one document.
Yep. I think that makes good sense. I can say that on mine, the ones I did were the processing of land use application. I think we slaughtered this back and forth. My changes are nothing more than wordsmithing, so I don't think there was anything substantive in there. It reads 85% the same. Goals and comprehensive.
Hey, sorry, Bob. Dick, maybe you can go on mute.
Wow, that was bad. Thank you about that.
I muted him, sorry.
Okay.
Come on, Pam, get with it.
The goals of the comprehensive plan, again, just a minor wordsmith change. The town-owned land, I made what I thought was a little bit of a change that's substantive. And that was, from my perspective, happy to share a thought with people, is that I think Tom had some language in here about, I incorporated much of what he said. I thought that I didn't want to, at this point, start to talk about lining out streets and that sort of thing. I think that's really kind of premature at this point. We're at a very, very early stage. So I took out the sentence about streets, blocks, land uses, massing, open spaces at this point, because that will flow from, I hope, a critical master plan of the town-owned property. So I basically condensed it, made it tighter, and that was the only change I made there. And parking was nothing more than wordsmithing, no substantive issues whatsoever. Required retail area, I don't think I made any changes. It was as is. Dick, I don't know or if anyone else made any changes at all or suggestions in those areas.
Well, Bob.
Yes.
I unfortunately I don't have any of that language in front of me.
Okay.
I
just sent it 10, 15 minutes ago. It's been one of those days.
No worries. Let me go ahead and get it.
Mhm.
And we can come back to that.
Good.
So, oh, sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
Well, so I sent maybe, 40 minutes ago, I drafted a sort of a preamble and kind of an executive summary, which I thought might be helpful for a couple of reasons. And it's very much a draft and open to your comments, but I thought it might be helpful. One, to get at also, something I've been trying to get at from the beginning, which is to express support kind of generally on paper.
Mhm.
And two, to be very direct when we do have comments. A lot of, this is ended up being somewhat of a lengthy document, this proposed memo, and that's not bad. But if someone wanted to know, hey, what does the planning board think quickly on the FBC? I put together just sort of like a two sentence summary of each of the sections, which also is open to editing, but I think can be a good thing to have at the beginning of this document. So if someone takes a document and reads it, they can just read the first page and kind of know where we stand, and then can get into the details later.
I think that's terrific. We talked about doing it. I think that's great, Eldon. Thank you for taking that on.
So I sent around a Word document that is separate from the memo itself, but certainly should be, I think, be part of this thing going forward.
Great.
Eldad, how did that go? Did it go through the town email?
Oh, no, I sent it via carrier pigeon. It should be at your house soon.
I don't see it.
Yes, I did. Anyone else get it?
The town got it.
Okay, hang on.
I got it.
Let me go on the town email for a second here.
Yeah, it's town email. I had responded to Felicia's
Okay, good.
email.
Yeah, folks, I can't more that you use the town email. I really can't. This is a hot ticket item here, and I would hate for your personal emails to become subject of a suit, a lawsuit.
Mine. Keep mine out of it.
I wouldn't want mine in it either.
So, and then Dick, I see that you made some comments, and then it was transmitted via a JPEG, which is a choice. But I read through some of those, and I think they make sense to me, actually, for the most part.
Would it help if, I can try and share a screen and all that to put them up, or how are you guys?
Yeah. Eldad,
can
yeah. I have the ones in parentheses are jokes.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I get jokes.
Kanan had some. I thought I'd do some. Cut.
I like it. I do have one, a couple questions about some of the points made. One on the town-owned land, Bob. I actually liked the suggestion for the roads and the master plan and all that, but I'm completely comfortable with taking it out because it's neither here nor there at the very moment. I'm okay with it, and I'm okay with it out. But there is language in here, and I don't know if you changed that, Bob, in your revised section that says, we believe town-owned land should be designated at this early point for civic or public development. What the previous sentence is that it's premature to rezone town-owned land for housing. I'm not sure that I completely agree with that, but also I would, since town-owned land looks like it was not going to be in the proposed geographic area of the FBC, I'm not sure how much it matters, but I think what we do say and put on paper matters, because 10 years from now, someone will throw it in our face and say, you guys were against housing on town-owned land, and so you have no right to be in favor of it now. But I don't know. I'm not necessarily 100% comfortable with saying that that it should be designated for civic or public development, unless that is so generic enough that it could include housing.
I think it could be. I left it, by the way, the answer is the language is left in completely, those two sentences are in there.
Well, do you think
could-
that this language that it should be designated for civic or public development opens for the door? Hey, Conan, does it open the door for housing?
I don't see that it forecloses it, because if that is considered to be a public useful development,
Right.
sure.
So maybe
I don't see that now. I mean, if you want, I don't have a problem with.
what I was going to suggest is maybe on the sentence before that it says that it would be premature to rezone town-owned land exclusively for housing. Is that okay?
That's fine.
I'm going to ask everybody to just hang on a second because I cannot find anywhere the document you guys are talking about. So one of the problems I'm having here is that I'm trying to download, Bob, your document on the from the town website, and it's just not loading for some reason. It's just
Okay.
not loading.
It's at the
So-
bottom there. Sometimes it loads at the bottom with their
No,
system.
no, I understand. No, it's
No.
I understand how to work it. It's just not
Okay.
loading.
Try
it's-
try your personal
Yeah.
email, 'cause it's in
Well,
there
what I
too.
have on my personal email is the latest from you, which is a document which is processing land use applications
Keep going down. It goes down.
and goals of comprehensive plan.
Yep, keep going. You'll get the town-owned land.
Oh, okay, got it. All right, okay, sorry for the interruption. Let me take a read. Go ahead.
So, Tom, what I'm suggesting on that town-owned land section is there's the two sentences that starts with the consensus of the planning board is that it would be premature to rezone town-owned land. All I'm actually suggesting is to include the word exclusively after town-owned land, exclusively for housing. That would just give me a little bit more comfort to say that we're kind of open to it all. We just aren't saying that housing is the only way to go now.
I think
Well,
that's fine. I like that.
But the proposal is not exclusively for housing. The town-owned land has it in it actually a community center.
No, I recognize
And
that.
also has retail as part of it.
Absolutely, but I'm just saying, but this language specifically,
Well, this language doesn't work either. So I mean, this doesn't, this language also suggests that it's being exclusively, it also suggests that implies that we're talking about exclusive for housing. It is for predominantly for housing. So maybe it would be premature to maybe it should say, be premature to rezone town-owned land for any specific use and avoid the whole housing, question.
Yeah, and that really leaves it open for a master plan study, which is what I think we were really suggesting to the town board.
Yeah, which would include, which would likely, I would think, maybe not, who knows, but could include housing, could include anything. And that's the point.
Anything,
I think it's supposed to be an open question.
okay, good. Can
So
I?
what was that language again, Tom? What was that?
Just for to rezone town-owned land for any specific use.
Good.
Yeah, because we do go on to say that it should be important for the town to engage in a master plan to explore potential future uses of town-owned land.
Yep.
Okay, if I raise another question,
Sure.
this time it's on Tom, the architecture section.
Oh, yeah, that's not necessarily to be, put in chapter and verse, right? Those
Yes.
are just for ruminations.
Totally. So what I would like, not that anyone asked, but what I would like is I would love for this to be, again, a little bit more direct, as maybe at the end. Basically, I mean, I summarized it at the beginning, but I'm not sure that the summary matches what this says. And basically what we're saying is we shouldn't be so prescriptive when it comes to architectural styles. Is that fair to say?
Yes, generally speaking, that's the overall point that I was trying to make. Yes.
My only recommendation is that it says that more strongly here.
Oh, yeah, I concur with that. Absolutely, Eldad.
I'm
I
sorry.
think that we had that conversation last time, and I think that was the kernel that we took away from Tom's thoughts. And then also, which I thought was very interesting, did everyone get a copy of the ARB minutes and their memo to the town board? I think it
No.
was right on point with our discussion. And
I didn't get a copy.
oh, you didn't?
Well, let me put it differently. I didn't, it's not that I didn't get a copy. I didn't search for a copy.
Okay.
That doesn't mean I don't have
Emails
it.
from last week, I think.
It was not a memo to the town board. It was a copy of their minutes, which outlined their discussion items on the form-based code.
And there were 2 sets of minutes, as I recall,
Correct.
2 meetings.
As a note of point, is it possible for the members of the board who submitted comments in PDFs or JPEGs to actually submit the Word documents to us?
Yes.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yep.
Thank you. It will make together easy.
Absolutely. Of course. Of course. Once I figure out the secret to the town-owned Outlook.
Call Sullivan Data.
Oh, I'm beyond that. They can't help. It's just very different from ours. Anyway,
Well, the town system, you need to have a new email address. It can't be all capital letters. It has to have numbers and some sort of, other mark. Once you do that, you can get in again, but it'll challenge you each time with your existing brand new password. And you just have to sort of buzz through that.
The other question, or the last question I had from the main doc, actually kind of has to do with the housing types piece.
Yeah.
And what you missed is that I had emailed around, like I said, unsolicited. I drafted a preamble and an executive summary of sorts.
Oh, I'm
for
sorry.
this
Yeah.
for this document. It's sent to all the town emails. And so I gave a shot at summarizing, really just 2 sentences for each of these. For the housing types, I guess I wanted to know if my summary is accurate with what you had written here. The summary reads, the limited geographic area, i.e. North Greeley, should be used as a pilot to be prescriptive about housing types, amount of affordability, and depth of affordability. Is there a different or specific recommendation that you're making here?
The only additional thing I wanted to say was that it's an opportunity for us to really explore different housing types because, which is where I sort of alluded to the live work unit and, additional different ways to deal with retail and housing sort of in the same space. So I guess what I was trying to say is that there is a lot of, there's a lot of room here for us to experiment and get something that might work overall. But I think you captured it really well in the 2 sentences you just said. So yeah. But the idea is, should we, is this a good place for us to sort of ask our consultants to give us options of different types of housing?
So let's be clear about what this is. Yeah, because we're commenting on a proposed zoning code here.
Right.
And for one to say the limited geographic area should be used as pilot to be prescriptive about housing types, blah, blah, yada, yada. I don't mean that pejoratively.
I got you.
It's saying, well, the form-based code is fine the way it is. But the next thing you should do is take the next step and address affordable housing with a little bit more of a comprehensive look. That's fine to say. But the implication here is that the form-based code is, with regard to affordable housing, is fine the way it is. And
No.
if that's the way we feel, then that's fine.
No, I don't think that's what we're saying. We're saying that it's important to, at least from what the piece that I wrote, the thing that we're saying is if we've got to get this right, we have to be very prescriptive about the number of housing units, as a total, the impact, the actual economic impact, and then we should spend the time exploring different types of housing types to accommodate housing in general. And I somehow, I'm trying to get away from this whole term of affordable housing versus housing that is affordable, because we're trying to suggest that there are different ways to make space for housing that is going to include many different income bands. And so to just call it affordable housing like neatly puts it in an architectural bucket that necessarily is seen very negatively. So I'm trying to get away from that.
Right, and I read your notes, your language on all that, when you sent it, and it seems to be very thorough. And I was just worried that the implication in this sort of bullet heading, it doesn't really say anything about it. To me, I don't know. It just seems like it's not really addressing what we think ought to be in the form-based code itself. It's just saying that at some point in time, it should be used as a pilot project. I'm just saying that maybe it ought to be a little bit more specific if we feel that there ought to be provisions in the form-based code itself that require a project when it comes up to go through that comprehensive analysis, or that there be criteria within the form-based code itself that a project needs to adhere to. But right now, it just doesn't seem like it really is calling for anything specific.
Are you talking about the bit that I wrote, or?
I'm talking about, I'm talking about the bullet point that Eldad wrote, the housing types bullet point here.
So that's just a draft language, I strongly encourage Conan and whoever to edit so that it reflects what's written in the more robust way behind.
Well, my concern with the bullet is it's inconsistent with what we've done with the rest of the document, in that all of a sudden on this particular subject, we're just looking at North Greeley, when I thought we had agreed that we would be looking at the FPC as proposed, even though the town board has now decided to move forward to look at a much smaller area. It strikes me as it's just different, inconsistent. If we want to do that across the board, and I thought we decided last time that we should not do that, that we should address the document as proposed, and there'll be some subsequent time when the town board is reconsidering the small area. So again, I wouldn't just talk about North Greeley, and it seems to me that
So Bob, the one thing that I did was I sort of talked to the general document first.
Right.
And then I thought part of our thing was that we shouldn't miss the opportunity to use this really North Greeley as a way for us to almost tell them what's a good template. And so that was where I sort of got into, this is a good place to discover housing types. In addition to, stating what you had mentioned before, Eldad, it's like, let's be prescriptive of how much of the housing is affordable, what kind of income bands are we supporting, and what's the cost to the town for it, which is what is everyone's sort of out of joint because of that. So if we are going to be very, very prescriptive, let's all sort of agree on, everyone has to come to consensus that yes, we will have some sort of subsidized housing, and that's the cost that it is to the community. Once everyone's familiar with that as a real number, then it's going to take away the friction that we are seeing right now, in my opinion. And then ultimately, there was this conversation on the different types of housing, where my point is that the only point I wanted to make there is that it's a really good opportunity to explore North Greeley almost as a test case of trying out different models, and then that sort of is repetitive when it becomes a larger, if and when it becomes a larger, area.
Got it. And that's as I had understood it. I thought your writing was very clear. I also thought that there were a lot of imperatives in there. We must do this and must do that, but it certainly does get the point across. So with regard to the North Greeley, just for example, so that we know what we're recommending, if the North Greeley area does receive this form-based code zoning,
Mhm.
and the EIS is in place, and the new regime for how these projects are going to be reviewed, everything's in place. How would one, when a project comes up, for example, a 30-unit project comes up for development, how would the town deal with that? Under your proposal for using it as a pilot area, what would the town then proceed to do with that developer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at least the way so what I'm saying is we should know by now, when we are down to that particular, let's say 1 or 2 sites, we should know by now how many of these units need to be affordable. One of the other things that I'm saying is affordable should not be a criteria in how we design, right? That's an economic impact, and that's dealt with through subsidies and tax breaks and all of that.
Right.
So what we are saying is by now we know that, let's say we're putting together 25 units there, 5 of those are affordable. It
Okay.
doesn't matter. What we're trying to explore is now what kind of live work, retail, other, retail at the bottom, flat on the top, whatever different housing scenarios we're trying to explore. We have some language in there to ask the developer to give us those options, because that's where we're going with, that's where we want to create a more unique environment and then see if that works for us. I mean, this is just my idea, right? Like, I think that would then be effective. Like, it no more is a conversation about affordability, because that is an economic construct. But now we are saying, what is the kind of housing we'd like to see in this place?
Right. So the next step beyond the affordability is a social construct.
Exactly.
And so the question I would have is, I think I'm on board with what you're saying. At that point in time, when whatever terms you use and economics are applied to a particular project, and let's just say the number is 5 units out of 30, just for
Right.
talking purposes. All of that would be, I'm assuming, all of that would be in not only the form-based code, but I think there are also requirements, unless I'm mistaken, Sabrina, I think I know this by now, there are also requirements in our town code for affordability. And so that's already in the town code.
Okay.
Now, we may not think that the percentages are appropriate. Maybe they ought to be more, maybe they're too much. I don't know. That's a separate question for the moment. But now that that's set and the developer comes in with the understanding and the finances to actually build those 5 units out of the 30, the next question is, who are what population groups, what demographic occupies those 5 units, and how do we decide, and how does one arrive at that?
Okay, so I mean, if you're asking me, this is still an economic question then, right? Because what you're saying is, who's going to occupy these units? It's going to be, if there's a developer who comes in and the developer understands it's a mixed income complex that he's going to build.
Right.
He knows that he needs to find sources. It's just what it typically means is that if he or she is building this thing, they know that now I have room to go and get this subsidy from X source or Y source, whether it's New York State HCR or anyone else, to add to bring in as a source to provide for these 5 units, right? So
right.
And what it makes clear then is that obviously we want to bring in a developer who understands how to build affordable housing, so that or understands the structures of economic structures that need to be in there to be able to bring that money in.
Right.
But other than that, I think it's an exercise of what do we want this space to look like for different people. So I think the question, if you're asking me, is it a 2-bedroom versus a 3-bedroom versus a studio, that's a different, yeah.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm not asking that. I guess I'm trying to understand, because we're talking about the code now, right? I'm trying to understand what role the form-based code plays in the process after which the developer has met all of the form-based code requirements, the 5 units need to be, right? And has put together his financial stack with, whatever, buy-ins you get from, from, from social services, whatever the funds might be to support the five
Right.
units. What role does the town play beyond that? Does the town get involved in saying, well, I'm talking about who is going to be there?
But that's not, it seems to me the form-based code, we're getting off on something here. It's very important.
I
All
know.
those things are economic issues. That's not the form-based code. The form-based code, I think, is what Kanaan hit very strongly. And that is, it is integration. That structure, that appearance, that building has got to be integrated with the rest. It's got to be seamless. And that, it seems to me, is the takeaway. I don't know what the right numbers are because we don't know what the right numbers
Oh,
are.
but the architect,
But assuming that there are some right numbers at some point, the bottom line is that building, those structures have got to meet an integrated standard that we set up in the form-based code.
I don't think you need to do that, because I think that those integration standards are already in, unless I'm mistaken, there are standards criteria that go to that you need to be sure that the architecture and the units are not stigmatized, and that.
Well, we got Conover across the street, and I would argue Conover is an absolute abortion in terms of affordable housing. It's an island out there. It's hideous. It's separated from the rest of the community. It is a horrible example, in my opinion, of affordability. And that is a good prescription in terms of what we don't want to see ever again, where we have a building that is for the affordables, and that's it. Integration is what I think Kanaan is really stressing. And if you don't have integration, you got social engineering that is unsuccessful.
Well, I don't disagree with you, Bob. And you and I fought Conifer from day one, and we fought tooth and nail, and we lost.
Yep, absolutely.
And however, on the other hand, we have the example of the cupola building,
Exactly.
which is done superbly well.
Yep. And
So-
that's the model, it seems to me.
I think that's probably, both these developers know how to do affordable housing. I think it's how, well, they have a business in affordable housing, let's put it that way, Dick. But the point is that, the location is important, and exactly what Bob said, the idea that by virtue of where they put this housing, you've just stigmatized a bunch of people who are going to live between the railway and the Sawmill Parkway. And that's my only point. If you're going to build 5 units, let it be 5 units, but let's integrate it super well. That is the only point I have to make. If there's
With
only
the
one
structures
point
that
I'm
are being
allowed to
built.
make, that's what
Yeah.
I'll do.
Well,
And I thought you hit it really well in terms of that integration issue. I thought that was critical.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
I thought there were already protections for that. We got.
And maybe we need to go further, because clearly the output did not come through as far as Conifer was concerned,
Not a Conifer.
my opinion.
Yeah,
Sorry.
well, we would have lost anyway.
I know.
We tried at Conifer, we tried like crazy. We raised every single example, every single point that we could make about this is the worst stigmatization you can have for this building. It's just the worst place you could put it. And the state came in. These people had their representatives, and they came in and they said, I'm sorry, Newcastle, you don't have a say in this. You just don't have a say in this because the state rules, right?
Can I refocus this conversation?
So,
Sorry.
Okay.
yeah. Why?
Well,
Because we shouldn't be talking about another project that's currently in the development stages or gone through the approval process.
Well, the issue to me, it seems to me, is the prescription ought to be in our code a requirement that the integration be in the building type. It should be by floor, and that is integrated on the floor. Again, using the cupola building, I think that's the role of the form-based code. It is,
Okay.
I think, to make a very general observation that let's take a look at the numbers. We have no idea what numbers are the right numbers in anything on this at this point because we don't have the EIS. And Tom has raised that innumerable time. What's the right? And so look at that number, and then whatever you decide, in my view, the form-based code should require those kinds of prescriptions so that looking at any door, any window, no one knows who lives where or what. If it's market rate, if it's owned, if it's rented, if it's affordable, if it's workforce, whatever. And that was the success, I think, of the cupola building program, which won Sabrina a huge award. No cash, just a huge award.
It won the
So-
town a huge recognition.
So here, let's just see if we can, Bob, first of all, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I really don't. I don't understand where the town has any more, what the town's supposed to do anymore on this. I mean, within the form-based code itself, the architectural facade regulations are such.
Yep.
That you are protected, I think, from the kinds of concerns you're talking about, at least from the perception of the outside of the building. With regard to the inside of the building, where you not have all the five apartments all on one floor, right? So they're segmented that way. I don't know. I don't know what the form-based code does about language. I mean, you could go ahead and put it in there, but I think that the only thing you can have is generic language on this, I think, unless you want to get specific about all the ways in which these units could be stigmatized.
I can research how they've done it in New York City, but like there is actual language after such kind of projects where, there was then a poor door and a rich, like they literally were able to like say, here's the entrance for the affordables and and then that sort of became headline news where they sort of said that they segmented the building. So yeah, I think to answer your question, Tom, I would err in the direction of giving more information about what's not to be done almost as part of the code by leaving open what can be done. So I'm okay with any architectural style, any of this, but like you said, there's language, for instance, in New York City where even the finishes inside the apartments have to be the same no matter what. So you can't put black granite in one of these and then put some sort of, that's how they've banned all of that in New York City to an extent that you, like you said, you cannot enter a unit and know whether this is an affordable rental unit or it's a market rate unit.
Okay,
because basically the government and taxpayer dollars are subsidizing that unit. So the point is that the developer should not be cutting corners at all.
Well, what happens in that case is that the subsidy has to be greater to be sure that everybody gets granite countertops.
I'm not justifying that the granite countertop at all. But what I'm saying.
Actually, you are. It's okay.
Well, I shouldn't. Then that is not the intent here. Yeah.
Connor, can I?
If I have no problem with people having granite countertops. I'm not. That's not a pejorative statement. It's just saying that if there is a standard by which the market rate units are built, and they happen to be granite countertops, which is likely in this market, then it turns out that the 5 units will have granite countertops.
Correct.
So it means that there needs to be extra money that is given to the developer in order to build the granite countertops, which is fine.
But so I'm not sure that we need to get into the finishes necessarily, but in the city, and it is in the zoning language, they talk about, so the pour door issue is there, which meaning there can't be a separate entrance, although I don't think that's going to be necessarily relevant here because of the size of the buildings. But maybe more relevant is location of the units and distribution of the units. And that goes a little bit more beyond the architecture. Tom, I agree that the architectural language should mean that there is no real distinction from the outside, but from the inside, instead of putting all the affordable units on the lower floors and pointing towards the back, they have to be an equal distribution on floors and throughout the building. And so maybe some proactive language like that.
Correct. That
would be perfect. I think that makes perfect sense, Eldad.
Well, I don't. I'm sorry. For a moment, just let me see if I can give you a, not a contrary view, but an alternate view, which may seem contrary. I'm just not sure that this level of specificity, here's a thought. If we really believe in this, right? And I do, I happen to believe in everything we're saying here. I think it's all important. Why would it apply only to this form-based code district? Why isn't it part of the overall zoning requirement, affordable housing requirement, however this gets
Sure.
put into legislation? Why isn't it why doesn't it pertain to the whole town?
It should. It should.
100% agree.
Good. So I guess I'm suggesting that maybe this isn't something that is specific to the form-based code.
No, but then you're not you have an opportunity to inform the current code. Otherwise, you're going to leave it out.
We're going to leave it out of this one,
Add
but you're going to
something.
make, sorry, go ahead.
Can I add something? Because I know that we started this under a previous version of the code that we know is being changed. It is not, it may be helpful because I think you all are talking about a very salient point about changing our affordable housing requirements code-wide, right?
Globally. Yes.
Globally. It is not in looking at the finish line, right? So my job is to help create code, right? This redraft of this code. There have been discussion items that affect the general hamlet area, the commercial zoning across the board, not just on the North Greeley corridor, like allowing residential on the first floor, right? That is something that we would need, that the town board will need to grapple with as to how it would be incorporated into zoning. There has even been suggestion by certain town board members that they would like to see zoning changes, but they don't want a form-based code. So, what I would say to you is that if this is something that you want to recommend it as part of your comments on the form-based code, because one, incorporating it into the form-based code, whatever version it ends up, but then also suggesting that it be incorporated into the rest of the code, I think is completely appropriate. So don't hold back by that. And there may be other things you want to apply as well.
Good. I like that. And I guess what I would suggest, because it just, there's so many nuances to what we're talking about here physically, that maybe, Kanan, it's not the New York City code that gets referenced, because maybe it's a little bit too restrictive, or for whatever reason, maybe it's just right. But that we suggest that there is a reference criteria that is available somewhere, that the form-based code that the town can adopt within the form-based code without them having to sit down and write it all out and figure out what it is.
Well, I like the idea, Eldad's idea, which is going to be a very broad, prescriptive, generic, integrative, without getting into details, and certainly not to the detail like the form-based code does in architecture and lintels and treatments, but basically just saying performance-wise, appearance-wise, it's got to be fully integrated.
That's
And
already
leave it
there.
at that. And I think performance is sort of, there's both sides in this kind of way, but to get into in the form-based code at this point, I think we sync it with more of the architecture and these kinds of prescriptions.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say, Bob, is I think that stipulation already exists. It's such a general statement. I mean, that stipulation that it needs to be integrated, there's so much detail and nuance in that it can be interpreted, down to the doorknobs or not to any of it, the way it's done. It's just all in how it's administered.
I'd like to talk for a bit when you're finished.
Sure, Dick.
What I'm hearing is something along the lines of integration of various housing units. I would,
Sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Why do we have problems with Bob's audio every time?
The Dick's, you mean? I hope.
integrated with retail and
I mean, Dick's.
create positive economic and cultural outcomes.
Dick, we can't hear you.
Dick, you have to talk into your phone.
Oh, that's it. Okay, I'll try again.
Okay.
The words I have in mind listening to everybody is that we're looking for integration of various housing units, parentheses, along the lines of the cupola building, parentheses, and then integrated with retail and business to create a positive economic and cultural outcome. And I would say, to that end, the town board's decision to test the concept in the worst looking section of downtown should yield an improvement and perhaps a better future plan. And Kanan, I appreciated your humor in that, and I wanted you to know that I exhausted all of my French and Latin and architectural knowledge that I could. Wasn't much in your document. Thank you.
So I'm at this point I'm done. I'm fine with it. Whatever you guys want to come up with, I agree that this is an important subject, and we ought to go ahead and put our foot forward on it. Anything that causes, encourages, requires more integration rather than less is a positive good. It's a good thing. How that gets done, how that gets written, how that gets administered, it's a complex thing, but the way to start is just to get it out there. So I agree.
So, our goal in the memo is sort of to advise the town board as to what we think, of the proposed zoning and what changes can be made. So I think we want to be as specific as possible. And so two things, Connor, if you want to just maybe adjust the language so that it's a little bit more specific, prescriptive, definitive, and also, the draft that I sent around as far as the bullet points, just edit it because that obviously was not reflective of what you were trying to say.
No, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but what I will do is I'll take it, and if it means to actually start with, I think what you're trying to say is make it very emphatic that these are the points you want to make. I get it totally. So I'll make sure that those are the opening lines. Or
Can I suggest something here? And I don't know if you were on the line, Kanan. I have asked everybody who has not submitted a Word version to submit a Word version to me and Felicia. We will culminate everything in one draft for you guys then to mark up, and you can all mark it up. If you use track changes in Word, then it will be very easy to discern whose comments are whose. And we will provide you for the next meeting we set a completely track change document. And we're taking notes and trying to keep track of what you're saying tonight so we can tweak it a little bit, which we will do, but that's kind of the process. I don't want, Kanan, you to take LDADs and fool with it and then circulate it, and then Dick not to get your copy. Let's try and be succinct.
I think the other one issue that I want to raise on this housing types is we have been talking about affordable or housing that is affordable. It's but it seems to me that that's only part of it, and that's to echo what I think Tom said at the last meeting. That's not the only flag that we have here on housing. And I think to a certain extent, preaching to the town board on housing and affordability, this town has done really, really, really well on affordable housing. You may disagree with that, but the statistics are absolutely in our favor. We have gone above and beyond what most of the towns and villages and cities of well, maybe not the cities, but the towns and villages of this county. So what I thought we were also going to be talking about, and this is what's in the comprehensive plan, it seeks to provide a variety of viable housing options. And yet this document, to me, I think is overweighted toward affordability. I thought we were talking about what we wanted to see was a broader cross-section of housing possibilities. And again, to Dick's point, to make that, integrated with what we think might be a better economic and cultural hamlet. So I thought, Kanan, you were going to, and I love this, about the different kinds of units, because we didn't think about that until last time, and I thought that was very exciting, and I think we should emphasize that. But there were issues in terms of, integration of market. I thought we were talking about perhaps some blend of ownership as well as rentals, and that's not here. And I thought that was something that we were going to talk about. Maybe it gets too broad, and maybe it just seems to me that
I can
my
add that
takeaway.
in. I can totally add that in. I was trying to separate the whole economic versus the
Right.
the construct of affordability and the different income bands occupying these with the kind of unit, the housing types that you create. And maybe it's what we are calling housing types is different, right? When you say it's for ownership or for rental, I'm thinking it is more like it's a live work unit versus a 2-bedroom apartment versus a studio, so those
Right.
are so I get what you're saying as well, and maybe that language needs to come back where you're basically saying it wants to be a mix of ownership and rental. I mean, coming from a developer's perspective, I can tell you that it becomes, it may be difficult, but again, I think as a broad language, if we don't restrict them, it's hard to restrict them both in terms of what kind of units they're building and then also restrict them. So like if you're telling them, yes, create live work and then create 5 or 6 affordable units, but then you're going to tell them that there needs to be something for sale and something for rental within the same complex. Now it's just going to make it really hard because they have to create different legal structures and it's got to be owned differently. And that's where I think it would be difficult for them to understand how to parse the two. But yeah, there should be language that within the entire hamlet, there should be a mix of X or Y, different types of ownership versus rental units. So one of the things that I was suggesting as a different housing type to be explored was, what is called like a grandma unit as part of single family, so you don't necessarily have to have multifamily zoning, but within single family, you're now going to allow, like this is a big conversation right now in California, where you're talking about bringing in multiple, you're just allowing them to have an ancillary living unit on single family property. And right there, you're densifying, right? You're almost doubling the density right away. And that is something that we should be able to explore as well, like that we should be open to having that as a housing type.
We already have that.
Oh, then I think that then we should we should call it out as something that we are proposing for the hamlet. But if we have it, that's great.
We have it.
Well, and I think also, I don't think we should be shy in trying to be cute and walk around this affordability issue either. This town is pretty sophisticated, knows what we're talking about. So I think we ought not to be, shy about it. Let's put it that way.
No,
but
and I'm
think,
very happy to put that in, but I think what happens is that it just gets bucketed as something that is probably an eyesore, something we don't want, and then just allows the sort of NIMBY conversation to build. And I think it doesn't have to be that way. That is the only reason to think about it differently.
Well, we have to be concerned with that. You're very correct in that. You have to be concerned with that. But it seems to me, I think some of the exciting things that are possibilities for this new living structure, I think that people are going to be looking for. It offers all different kinds of alternatives rather than this conventional box stuff that we've all been doing. I personally believe that COVID has accelerated things very, very significantly. We're going to see very seismic changes in the way people are going to commute, not commute, and try to work from home and within home. So, to the extent my mother's in an apartment building down in Portchester. It's got all kinds of workspaces downstairs. It's got its gym, workout areas downstairs, and it's all living upstairs. It's all within the unit. It's all rentals, and but it just offers all these different kinds of things and things that people are looking for. I think as an alternative in terms of their live work activities.
So we will, the future will declare itself, right? And it will in the developments that start to come to town. We'll find out, right?
Yep.
Which is interesting and exciting. And they will come in and they'll say, well, this is what the market needs. And the market, we're in the business of housing people, and this is what, people want to have. And we'll say, well, okay, that's great, but there are other people who, maybe you need to accommodate also. And can we get the unit mix to shift a little bit in order to get a greater variety, which in the end actually might be a better financial future long-term for this building anyway.
Mhm.
So, that's a conversation that the town will be having. I'd just like I think with regard to unit mixes, I do think it's an important conversation, and I don't know how we get it in there. I don't think that it's appropriate for us to right now, 2021, early 2021, try to predict what the right unit mix would be
Right.
5 years down the road, because there's no way we could know. But the populations, the affordable housing conversation, I think, in my memory, really started in town board meetings where there was a real interest that the members of the town board were hearing from the community of empty nesters who wanted to age in place, but they couldn't afford to.
Right.
And because they couldn't pay the taxes, and they didn't want to deal with a big house on property, but they did not want to leave the community, and they wanted to have a place where they could, an apartment that they could move to, or a townhome that they could move to, which would be ideal for them, and they could stay in the community and be part of the place that they've loved for years and years. That's an important component here.
So what kind of unit type are you supposing that would fit in?
It would be a 2-bedroom townhouse, 2-bedroom apartment, because these people do want have their kids come and visit.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a 1-bedroom apartment, but it might be a 3-bedroom apartment. But that's if you look at the things that the units at one end of the spectrum, the units that are proposed for Chappaqua Crossing, those townhomes, that's one
Mm-hmm.
type. I think another type is an apartment
Sure.
in the cupola building.
Yeah, and then going to the other spectrum, there is also folks, and this is another trend that is picking up, is a lot of kids who go out and work, but then they want to come back. And the sort of the living spaces that are being created, because we're so close to the train station, is then you have, and I don't know if you've seen, there's a lot of the common spaces are very well fitted out, and then they're sort of living in a situation where they have a room and a bathroom, and everything else is shared, like a kitchen and living area. That's a huge other component is also part of the conversation right now. I mean, I can tell you of very big significant moves of that kind of housing being created across as a attraction to millennials.
In the suburbs.
What I'm hearing now is that we just want to be more prescriptive about the different types of housing mixes we would like to see, and then
Yeah, exactly. That they should at least consider.
You know what? I would suggest be careful about mixes, because I don't even know how to describe that unit. You just described a new one to me, which
Right.
I had not heard of. I think that it's rather being sure that we identify the populations that we think we
right.
want.
So millennials,
people,
empty
right.
nesters, yeah. Mhm.
Right,
Which is what the comp plan did.
right.
Right.
But, public school teachers, right? I mean,
The workforce, yeah.
so if we can identify that more carefully, or support what the comp plan said, if we think the comp plan says it adequately, maybe that's the right way to go.
So what I think what I hear you saying, Sabrina, is you will turn something around. You have my Word document. You have.
I have Eldad's Word document. I need Bob Kirkwood's Word document, and I need Dick's Word document. And then I don't know that we received newer comments from Tom.
You have not received anything new yet.
Yeah. So we will incorporate that, and maybe put some space in reflecting some of the discussion tonight, so you guys can then retrack. And if we could all use Word, It will make it easier for everybody to see everybody else's changes.
Yep, will do.
Sabrina,
Yes, Dick.
this is Dick. I sent late today my comments on, on Kanan's document. I don't really have much on the other document. So you should have it, or Felicia has it.
You sent it as a PDF document, Dick. Do you have it as a Word document?
Listen, I'm so inept with the computer. Be happy that you got anything.
All right, we will type your comments in. No worries.
So one of the comments that was made earlier had to do with this.
I think you tapped it. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Kanan, do you have something to say?
No, I was just saying, I was looking at Dick's comments. It looks like you've just used caps. So Sabrina, if you just go into that document, that's mine, and
I saw.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I noticed that also. So it's not that
Listen,
difficult.
we're on top of it. It's not impossible to handle.
Okay. Okay.
Well, we're trying to throw you curves.
Good luck with that.
So the comment about the fact that the town board has decided to carve out a smaller district for the form-based code right now, and whether we should be really commenting based on our sort of feelings about that, or we ought to be just assuming that we're commenting on the entire district. I believe that we ought to stick to the original form-based code, the draft form-based code as it stands, and its larger district, because the town board now is saying that they are going to have a smaller area of the larger district where they're going to apply it. But that doesn't mean that some future town board might not say, okay, now let's amend it and bring in, the next area within the district. So I think we ought to assume that that the form-based code is being applied to the entire district as it stands, and go forward on that instead of just focusing solely on the North Greeley area.
That makes sense to me for two reasons. One is what you say is a future town boards, which is what I was trying to get at with the housing of the town-owned land piece. But two, this proposal is subject to change further, right? I mean, it is not finalized and it's not being voted on anytime soon, unless I'm mistaken. And so it could shrink, it could grow, and so I'm supportive of that.
Yeah, I thought we had decided that last time, so I think that makes good sense. That's what's before us, and let's respond to it sooner than later. What's before us? So I think that's the way to go. We will never be able to act as fast as the town board changes things, so we should react to one thing, get that in, and then go from
You
there.
have more opportunity.
One, we should really talk about. And I think this is, I think the housing and the height and bulk are two. They're interwoven. I think architecture, we sort of know what we want to say there, I think. But bulk and height, it seems to me, Tom had some really important points in here. And I don't know how we solidify this and how we make a recommendation, but I think he's really hit some important issues that we need to discuss as we try to get our arms around this, because height and bulk, I think, ultimately, as Tom suggests, really could be the crucible. And it seems to be the issue that ultimately, when you distill everything, that's caused the greatest amount of concern from the community. And so we really ought to think about that. And I don't know what I don't know if we'll ever know what the right number is. And I think that's really the task that's before everyone, but there is some sort of right mix of everything, and that's architecture, it's affordability housing, it's commercial, it's whatever. But anyway, I'll leave it to that. Maybe Tom, you can speak to your height and bulk thoughts.
Well, I reread them this afternoon, and they certainly It's an awful lot of, it's pretty wordy. But it just seems to me that you really, it's hard to know what the right answer is. And I don't think it's up to the planning board to decide what the right answer is. I mean, the way the town board, the way legislation happens, is that, legislation's put out there for review and comment. And, it's one of those things like going to the doctor. You say you don't feel so good, and he starts poking around and he says, does this hurt? No. Does this hurt? No. Does this hurt? No. And then, oh, it hurts there. And the only way you know whether it's the right number, I think, is when people finally say, well, wait a minute, this hurts. And the sense I get is that nobody has complained about, as far as I can tell, the existing height limit. Nobody's complained that 3 stories is too much, right? It's sort of a given that 3 stories is going to be okay. So one thing you could say is that 3 stories is probably acceptable, and that maybe ought to be something that the town board considers as the height limit. 4 stories might be pushing the envelope, but 4 stories may be in select areas where the impact of 4 stories doesn't really necessarily impact the core hamlet experience that people cherish, or at least don't necessarily cherish, but don't want to change, in order to give sort of a relief valve to the kinds of to get more development in here, because then it becomes more financially attractive for developers to come in. I will note that right down the street from you, Bob, there is a development which is 2 stories on deck. I think it's 2 stories on deck.
Yep.
And 2 stories on top of parking, right? And that's not cheap to do, which appears to be something a developer did, and assuming, COVID aside, assuming that was a financial risk worth taking.
Where is that, Tom?
It's in Pleasantville, right there on Washington, right down the street from Bob, right sort of up the street from Jacob Burns.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So it's got deck parking, and also has underground parking. So the parking is fully contained for the retail and the habitational.
If you were to putting the architecture aside, if you were to take the form-based code and walk to that building and take a look at it, you'd say, it looks like it pretty much meets, all the requirements, or most of the requirements. The parking is in the back the way it should be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's done. And I'm just not convinced. I have never been convinced that the argument that has been made before we had a consultant, and then after we had a consultant by the consultant, that you needed to have these 4 and 5 story buildings in order for a project to be financially viable. I just don't buy it. And I think that needs further examination. And one way for the town board to address this, I think, is not, well, what do we like and what we don't like, but what's practical, what can be built. And once you come to a decision about, well, what are the finances for a market rate building here? What's the minimum height to get a developer to come in and do it with parking the way we like it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The minimum number of units, return on investment, then apply the affordability criteria, or maybe that's done in the beginning of the mix, and then you'll get an answer as to how tall the buildings need to be. But right now, it just seems like they threw something at the wall, hoping it would stick. Not the town board, but I think the consultants really didn't give us enough information on this subject in order to make the kinds of height massing bulk proposals that are in the form-based code with any confidence. That's my feeling.
The only additional thing that I sort of added to that was the other way to determine what the town is comfortable with is, as you said, like if we are going with a height limit of 3 stories, let's say, there's a version that is a fully built out 3-story, meaning every single thing is built up to 3 stories in that, in that area. And there's sort of a very physical way to look at that and react to it. Like, that's the other piece, right? How much of this is, there's the economic viability, and then that is, what is the town comfortable with, or what are residents comfortable with? And that's where some sort of open charrette kind of method can be brought in, is what I
Yeah.
was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
So that you see different gradations of it, like fully built out at 3 stories, fully built out at 5 stories. Here's a mix of this, and here's a mix of 3 stories and less than 3 stories. And then, it's so, I think Eldad and I had talked about this, it's so visual that right away there's a buy-in or not. Like, you can say A, B, C, and D, and you're going to get a very clear thought of where you're going with this, rather than it like you said, throw everything at the wall and so, something might stick.
Well, I would suggest that the EIS shows you 3, 4, and 5-story proposals. So that's what people are reacting to. By whatever method we come to, I think would be a more, how do I say this, a more useful analysis, a financial analysis of 3 stories in today's marketplace, or in today's marketplace projected 4 years forward. That's the problem. We really don't know, because things are so upside down right now. But that would be a helpful sort of test case, business case sort of study of what the real financial viability is. And there is something to be said. I'll say this right now. There is something to be said for waiting for the right time to build. The longer these properties, I believe, the longer these properties sit vacant or underdeveloped, as the towns around us get developed, and who knows, maybe give up on some of the criteria that they would rather have in order to build now, the more valuable this land becomes. And I believe that this is true, and the easier it is to say, okay, we can do 3 stories because we can get a better return on our investment. Now,
can I just add? We made comments on the EIS about trying to get better financial feasibility analyses, and
right.
and so without that, certainly. It's hard to just make assumptions on financial feasibility as it pertains to height, right? I mean, these are just guesses: 3, 4, 5 stories, 12 stories, 1 story. I mean, we just don't know. And so we have asked for those, and hopefully we'll get answers on those. And so I think our comment here should, at the very least, include some reference to being guided partially by financial feasibility analyses that are forthcoming, supposedly. But in addition to that, I don't love the sort of the framing of the conversation that we should aim to have as little height or as little development as possible, as is feasible, because that gets away from some of the other goals of the comprehensive plan, and goals that I think are very important, which is the diversity of housing piece and affordable housing in general, right? I mean, there is a trade-off, and we have to acknowledge that. We can't have it all, right? And that's okay. There is no utopia, and the town of Newcastle is no different, right? But we do have to identify priorities and preferences. And so from my perspective, framing it as trying to get what is the minimum amount of height that is, sufficient to trigger development, is one way to look at this. And I think it's important so we understand kind of what is the minimum to trigger development, but I don't know that that's where we need to land as a town. as a planning board, I don't know that we can reach consensus as to what to advise, but maybe the advice is to tell the town board to do their best to balance priorities, taking a look at new financial feasibility analyses while also trying to meet the goals of diversity of housing and affordable housing. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but again, to Tom's comment in the past, that's only one element. So again, raising the flag as if that were the chief concern or chief goal of this whole exercise, I think is inaccurate. This is going back to what Dick said. This was all about stimulating the hamlet, and housing is certainly, and diversity of housing is certainly an element to that. But I keep going back to what we have before us, and that is, I've said this many times, Tom has said it many times. Ultimately, you're not going to accomplish the goals that we have set forth for this project solely with housing. So it's economic feasibility has got to encompass more than just housing and more than just diversity of housing. It's got to bring some sort of commercial base. We've said it many, many times. There has to be a there. You are not going to stimulate sufficient economic activity in this hamlet by having a self-enclosed hamlet with no people coming into the hamlet for any reason. So what is the there? What's the attraction? I wrote that actually in here. We've said this many times. This is supposed to be a place to go to, a place to arrive at, a place to be in. So it's much broader than the residents within the hamlet. And if we look solely at that and depend on that, I think we are destined for failure. And we will not meet the goals of this entire exercise.
I think, Bob, by saying what Eldad's saying, you're not necessarily negating what you're saying either. I think what he's trying to say is, if we want to be prescriptive, that economic feasibility is one, but also it almost seems like what we're saying is there's at least 4 different things that we should be concerned about to reach the kind of heightened bulk and mix that we're looking for. One is economic viability. The second is, the need to provide housing and different types of housing, and then also bringing in commercial and viable commercial enterprises that would make this a destination. But I think Eldad, you're saying we should say that there is a priority here and we care about different and more diverse housing.
Definitely. I think that we can't say we want it all, because that's not realistic. And we need to say some things are more important than others. And to us, it's X, whatever that is. And so that's kind of where I land. But in these discussions, I know that we have differing opinions, and that's okay, obviously.
No, and also I think, Eldad, to your point, it is going to be mostly how, the way I see it is economic viability is going to trump everything else, right? I didn't mean to use that word, but economic viability is going to sort of, determine what we're going to do. And I believe that most of the time, where we are in the suburbs, housing is sort of almost is the primary reason, is the primary driving reason. So I think that it is going to automatically be sort of the primary selling point for any developer who wants to build something. That's one. And to be honest, Bob, the minute you put that many people on the street because they live there, you are going to create the destination as a result of it, right? Like, so if there's more housing and then there is going to be you are going to need more of those little stores. You are going to have to provide for it. So it's almost like, I still remember, like, there are studies which basically tell you for every retail X number of square feet, you need to have that many families living in the area. Like, there is some, I'm sure Sabrina can speak to that. So I think we will be able to achieve all of that, and it's going to be driven by economic viability in the end.
So this is all great. I think that, first of all, Con, you're right. There are these, and I used to have these figures at hand. So many rooftops for a Macy's, right? So many rooftops for a barber shop, right? I mean, those are, you go to the ULI and they've got that and they'll give it to you if you're a member. I let my membership lapse, but yeah, that's all there. And I was astonished when I actually, as I first learned about that, how many rooftops it actually takes, right?
Yes,
To support a restaurant, for example.
yes.
And it's a restaurant support is not just the dinner hour, it's usually got to be the lunch hour also, or they're in big trouble.
Yes.
So I am not actually that impressed by an extra, and this is the upper number that's being used and not likely to happen, an extra 1,000 units. I'm really not so certain that it's going to transform the hamlet by that much. And if you look at the required retail in the form-based code, I think that there's only about, I forget, there's not that much more retail that's being proposed in there. And I think that it's being proposed it wasn't necessarily proposed because there was a financial analysis of what the added residents would support, as much as it was, well, here's where we want to have a nice hamlet streetscape with shops on it. And that's fine. That's a fine way to get at the answer also. Because I do think that the extra people there are going to make the cash registers ring more, but I don't think that it's going to get you more interesting shops. I don't think you're going to get, the kinds of places that you'll find, in the kinds of neighborhoods that people like to walk around in, like the Village, or, interesting areas that have all these quirky places with a lot of small shops. I just think that what you're going to end up with is, maybe an extra barber shop. I mean, you're going to get a lot of personal services stuff, I think, more than you'll transform the hamlet into the kind of destination that I think Bob is reaching for. So you will have a hamlet, I think, which is humming a little bit more, but what kind of a tune will it be humming? And one of the things that I thought was that I picked out that just came out loud and clear in the public meetings for the comprehensive plan was, and this is one of the genesis for this whole study, was, gee, the hamlet's just not very interesting. There's no reason to go there. There's no there. And so what is there, if you look at the list of tenants that are there, are a couple of beauty salons, barbershop, a small hardware store, a couple of restaurants. You can go through the list of, 2 or 3 banks, some real estate offices. And people are saying, well, there's no there, right? There's no reason to go there for that stuff. So I'm not sure that those stores are going to get transformed into a there because there are more people living in the hamlet to the extent that people expect. So I think that Bob's point that I share is that if, this is a big if, but if people want, I don't think it's an if, people do want the hamlet to be transformed, but I don't think that it's going to be done just by more people there. I think it has to be done there by some real creative, some real thought leadership on what kinds of attractions, what kinds of land uses, what kinds of events, what kinds of spaces could be here. And for the most part, we're probably talking about the town-owned land because that's where you have most control. You got a bigger,
right,
a larger acreage so that you have room to do this and move things around on and do something really interesting. I think that that's where that's going to come from, not from necessarily from more housing. And to Eldad's point, I understand that the more housing you have, the more affordable housing you have. I get that. But I think that there are 2 questions here, which is the first question is, how much housing is really enough, right? If 1,000 units isn't going to get us the there, why are we building 5-story buildings with no there? Maybe we ought to be building 3-story buildings in the kind of hamlet environment that we like, that we think is going to be charming, which is also going to make the cash registers ring. And on the second question is, well, how much affordable housing is the right number. Just because we could do more doesn't mean that we have to do more. If we can do enough within the, and we will do, I think we will do enough in a smaller, lower scale hamlet, with smaller buildings, we'll do our share. We will do our share. We'll be certain we do our share. Why should we feel obligated to take on the flag of affordable housing and plant it in the middle of our hamlet and say, well, we're going to do more than our share? I don't understand why the town should take that on as a mission statement.
Well, aside from that, one of the issues I just wanted to back up a little bit on because Tom and I were on this committee, and again, I'm not just making this stuff up. Repeatedly, I asked specifically to the economic consultant who was on the team, will housing alone do this? And repeatedly she said no. And it's very interesting also, as part of their study, they looked at neighboring towns, trying to find out, what the story was there. And interestingly enough, I think they selected, if I recall, Sabrina, Armonk, Pleasantville, Terrytown. Was Mount Kisco?
They may have looked at Mount Kisco, but it was on the larger side, so I don't
There were
know.
4 towns that they looked at: Terrytown, Pleasantville, Armonk. I don't know the 4th necessarily, but what was key in each of those 3 out of the 4 that I can recall is, well, what was driving Terrytown? What was the thing about Terrytown? Well, everyone identified right away the Terrytown Music Hall was something that drove people into the town. People came to the town, the village, from outside. Armonk built that new shopping center, right within the hamlet, and that was bringing people in from other parts of the town. Pleasantville has the Jacob Burns Center. It has become sort of like a regional resource for films. And that was driving the restaurant trade and driving a lot of the activity and buzz in Pleasantville. I forget the other town. I know we mentioned Peekskill. Peekskill has got the Performing Arts Center. Obviously, it's a bigger city than our hamlet. But it was, again, what we kept emphasizing was that there was something there that was drawing people in from outside. And I keep harping that this is a hamlet project, but it's also a town project. And there needs to be reasons for me to come into the hamlet to be there rather than to drive through, and for commuters just to drive through as quickly as possible and not stop. And again, I've raised this many, many times, but the reason I always talk about civic and public is I believe with Tom that some sort of private public combination on that property is going to be essential to drive this hamlet, whether it's going to be a world-class performing arts center, arts training place, some sort of athletics center, something along the lines of on a smaller scale of Chelsea Piers in town. Do you think that would drive activity in this town? It would boom the town. It would, if we had a world-class arts center, it would just boom the town. It would become a reason to go, especially right there with the train center. So I think those kinds of, and then when you have that in that kind of energy, the housing not only follows, but it explodes, and the demand for housing explodes, and the different kinds of housing will explode. And that's how you get the energy in the places. So it's very interesting to me that the recommendation that finally came from the consultants had none of this, and yet that was the thing that drove the economic study. It's a reason why we looked at the other towns outside of the Chappaqua Hamlet to see what was happening there. What was the secret? What was the secret sauce?
So, Bob, I agree with that. I mean, let's use the town and land to make something amazing that draws people and then drives demand and all that. But the point of the rezoning is the densification of the downtown is to allow that when the demand comes for that development to happen.
Agreed.
And Tom, to your question, why us? I mean, I'll flip that and say, why not us? Why shouldn't Newcastle be leaders as opposed to followers doing the minimum? But all I'm saying is that we shouldn't drive our decision based on exclusively on what is the minimum economically feasible to incentivize development and stop there. We should take into account some of the other priorities because again, there's always a trade-off, and it's a trade-off in the other direction as well, right? If we do just the minimum, then we've traded away the ability to do more housing, which in and of itself is a good thing.
So I guess first of all, I think you're being pejorative by saying doing the minimum. I mean, I thought I said that in the context of what is an acceptable scale housing for the people of the town, that we would do our fair share of affordable housing. So the minimum.
When I say the minimum, I just mean when we're talking about as far as like a economic feasibility, looking at those studies to say what is the minimum necessary to trigger development based on the economic analysis that we don't have yet. But I'm just saying that shouldn't alone be the driver for what the height limitation should be.
And okay, so I agree with that under the following premise. The premise, I think, and this is what comes out, we are not, we don't run this town. The town board doesn't run this town. The people run this town. And the people have come out and said, we don't want this town to be as proposed and as in the code itself and the imagery that has been put forward. We want a hamlet scale hamlet. That is, if there is one flag that gets planted that all the other sort of initiatives need to fall under, it seems to me that that's it. And it's not up to me to tell, I don't know how many households are, up in arms about this. It's not up to me to tell them how they should live in their town. It just isn't.
Sure, but
so to say, well, but the town really ought to do. You people really should take on the responsibility of doing more affordable housing than is actually expected of you, and that you need to suffer 4- and 5-story buildings in your hamlet in order to do that. I do not buy into that argument. I don't.
I get it. I would say two things to that. One is undoubtedly there was a loud and numerous opposition to this, but that's who spoke, right? I mean, always most of the majority of those who speak out are those who are opposed, and so I don't know. I've had a lot of conversations because I have been public and outspoken about my support about the concepts of the form-based code. A lot of people have approached me in various places around town. I coach one of my kids' soccer teams. A lot of people come out to me on the soccer field and all around. And I've had people reach out to me. I think there's a lot of silent support, and that's unfortunate, but that's the way these things work. And so I don't know that the town opposes this. I will say, obviously, that those who have spoken oppose it, and that's who gets heard.
And I also think that, Eldad, to your point, it is, there's been a lot of sort of misdirection, primarily because it is driven by some very fixed number of, images. And I think that's where, really sort of building out these different studies, almost like block models, allowing people to really sort of see it as options is probably the way to go, which is what I was suggesting is, that's
couldn't agree more.
I'm sorry, but there are renderings in
I know those are.
No, but that's what people are reacting to. And those are realistic.
I think those should never have been a part of that study.
Why not?
Because by looking at one rendering, you're not going to be able to tell the density of an entire street. One. The second is the number of units you're going to have. What kind of unit mixes are there? What kind of retail? So I think that it just tells a partial story. And I wish that it was done in a more comprehensive way.
So I'll say this much. I can look at a rendering and there are, by the way, there are massing. I think they're probably SketchUp. They're very crude, but there are massing models of each of the alternatives in there. And there are street views of those alternatives in there that are unrendered that show various locations. Mm-hmm. And then there are the rendered versions. And I look at those and I can absolutely tell what that's going to feel like. I mean, I absolutely can. And so can everybody else. All they have to do is look at that, look at those images, and they know. You can't sort of pretend, say, well, it's not going to feel that way. Of course it's going to feel that way. That's a massing model. That's what it's going to be. So I think that you owe the public that stuff. I don't think that you find a way to not show it. And
No,
and I don't know how you
definitely
get
not.
around telling them what it's going to be without showing them what it's going to
No, I think it's more of what I was suggesting is that it's more interactive as a way to inform the public. That's
be. But
all.
it was interactive. There were charrettes. There were meetings with presentations that the consultant made with that very material on boards in town hall. And I think there were 3 or 4 of them, unless I'm mistaken. I went to one of them. There were presentations where the consultant stood up in front of those images and explained it to everybody. And there were, like I say, 3 or 4 of them. So there is a process here, Kanan, that happened.
Sure.
Um,
No, and yeah, I agree that if that's the opinion, that's the opinion. There's, we have to sort of figure a way out outside of there. That's true too.
And it's hard for me to say, well, there's silent support for it. Well, I'm sorry, but silent support's not support. And I just can't go around assuming that.
No, I
Can't go around assuming that.
completely agree.
That the people who are vociferous about it are angry about it. Maybe there are a whole lot of people out there who are against it and aren't speaking up.
No, I agree, and it's not like the town didn't give people an opportunity to speak, and so you have a chance to speak, and you don't, then you can't say, well, I disagree. But certainly the vast majority of people who have spoken out against, but it doesn't, I don't feel bound to adjust my feelings and comments based on that. I'm aware of kind of what I think is the right thing to do, or the right attempts at things to do, and that's kind of where I fall on this. But listen, I get it. I'm just saying that there are different priorities here, and we have to acknowledge that we can't meet them all. So there have to be winners and losers, and we should be just clear on that. And as far as back to the context here, which is we're making recommendations to the town board on a proposed zoning code. We should be clear as to what we think as a town planning board, where the priorities should lie.
Well, this is where it gets tricky, because again, it's we can try and say what we think the priorities are. We can try and say, restate again what the objectives were in the beginning. And maybe they've become, I won't say distorted, but evolved over time, which is totally fair. That's a point of a public process, right? So we can sort of lay all that out and then declare that we think that 4-story buildings are right, or whatever, be very specific about what the outcome should be. Or instead we could say, which is what I think we ought to do, we can help them by outlining a process by which they can get to a decision, which has been lacking so far. I mean, we're the planning board. Planning is not just a plan, but planning is a process.
Yep.
And I think as a planning board, we could maybe advise them not necessarily on the specific outcome, but on the process steps that could be taken that would get them to, I think, a more informed decision. I just don't feel that right now they have the material in hand that they can use to really defend the form-based code as it stands, and the environmental impact statement, I think, has been a bit of a difficulty for them also. So I just think that's why I said, let's start with 3 stories and see if that's affordable. Because if it's affordable and you get a reasonable number of affordable units out of that, I mean affordable in terms of financially feasible, and you get an reasonable number of affordable units out of that, well, is that enough? And, maybe it's not, but, let's take a look at it and see. And maybe you can't get there. Maybe you need to go to 4. But
So,
there's-
so I agree. I agree with everything that you just said, which is why I'm suggesting for the height and bulk sort of takeaway is one, wait for before you make any final decisions. Wait for the the feasibility analyses that are being requested from a final EIS, and two, don't exclusively base your decision on financial feasibility analyses, because there are other priorities that come into play here, and do your best to balance them, acknowledging that not everything
Is equal.
not everything is equal, and not every priority can be met.
Oh, right.
I think would be, to Tom's point, I think on the bulk and height, we can issue our memo, right? And I'm not so sure what we say on bulk and height, but what we can offer, it seems to me, instead of coming out with something that we think is the consensus agreement here, and I'm not sure if we're going to reach that, maybe, and I suggest this privately to Tom in a conversation a while ago, maybe we take this North Greeley area and we offer to the town board to say, look, it's your deal, but we'll help you. Why don't we frame the different alternatives that might realistically occur? So we could look at this under current zoning, under current ownership, what it might look like, what the possibilities are. That is with the current small parcels. We could also look at it in terms of what it might look like, assuming some assimilation of some of these parcels, where we could have some larger buildings and maybe more options with that kind of build out. To me, I found the EIS for a public project to be as close to useless as possible, because it talked about the extremes. It's very useful on a private project, because the private developer will propose it and use the EIS as a tool to try to promote and we get the information out. But to me, to sit there and to do what we did, and assuming that we build out with 1,000 units to 963, whatever it was, and assuming we max out the parking need at XYZ, when everyone continued to say it's unrealistic, but we're doing this anyway because the state prescribes us to do this, I didn't find it that useful in terms of reality, in terms of what might happen or what could happen or what is likely to happen. So maybe we frame it like that way, and we say with charrettes or otherwise, and say, look, we'll try to do some planning here and get some ideas, and then offer them to you, to the town board. You guys make your decision. It's their call. I think it would be a very, very important role if we could help them with these kinds of alternative layouts. And again, throwing out different mixes. This is what it looks like if we do X amount of commercial. This is what it looks like X amount of market. This is what it looks like if we ramp up affordable to 20% fully integrated. Those kinds of things, and say these are realistic. These are possibilities that could occur in this North Greeley area, and see if that doesn't help. I agree with Tom. I think the town board received something from consultants. It wasn't necessarily the town boards, and the town board got tagged with as if it were theirs, and it got very defensive. It got very argumentative, and the support and need that the town board should have gotten didn't get. And just framing the questions and framing the issues and having the information.
So what you're saying is that we should suggest that the Greeley block be used as a test case, and so
Yep.
I like that idea a lot, because
For various alternatives.
yes, I think we are on the clock. Yes, and then once we have that, it can inform the better. It can inform the rest of the area.
Yeah, on this issue of bulk and height, I think because it's so important for all these issues. Again, Eldad's spoken very eloquently on this. If you start restricting height, automatically that really precludes certain alternatives that some people think are very, very important. So it's so important to get that deal.
I don't know that that's the case. I think it needs to be proven that it precludes alternatives.
Correct. Correct.
It's just,
you're correct. Yep.
They just kept. They were told in the beginning of the study look at 3 stories, 4 stories, and 5 stories. They were told that. And there just seemed to be an awful lot of energy behind the 5-story option from
Correct.
day one.
Yep, you're
And,
correct, Tom.
I think the 5-story option, the way it was, because it was that much development and the way in which it was done on town-owned land, just these big looming buildings. And in any event, the notion that that they use this as a sort of I think that Kanan, I know you in particular, I'm sure Eldad, you probably feel the same way, and Dick also. You know, maybe they're willing to go through a quick charrette process on this, and you know, get the public in. Now, you know, once you open that door, it can get to be very messy and time consuming. So they may not, but at least instead of having a public charrette saying, okay, what should this corridor be? We can suggest that they do some quick studies that show the alternatives as are being outlined by Bob, and put those out there. I don't know what their time frame is for closing this down, because I know there are property owners who are champing at the bit, who want to get going. So time would be of the essence and all that, but
I like that idea a lot.
a great idea. I will note that there is an exhibit, and I'm looking for it now, but I can't find it right now, but there is an exhibit in the form-based code that identifies, it's an interesting exhibit, and if you go through the code quickly, you might miss it, but it's a map that shows I forget what it's titled, but it shows the assemblages that would be necessary in order to actually build out the form-based code. Now,
It's a
it doesn't look-
consolidation map.
I'm sorry?
It's called a consolidation map.
Thank you.
Property
Consolidation map's got those yellow areas on it. It's very useful. It's very interesting. Now, it's not saying that you need to consolidate all of these parcels within this boundary in order to do anything. It just suggests that there is not one single parcel within this particular boundary that you can do on its own. And
Look, can I rephrase that a minute?
yeah, please do.
It's not that there's not one single parcel that can do it, that can take advantage of the code on its own. It's, you have to remember the impetus was the full build out, and you could not get to full build out and study any impacts without assuming a certain amount of consolidation. And
Okay.
you know, we have always premised that consolidation being, it was one, carefully looked at how you would consolidate the parcels. Okay, because it had to
Right.
make some sort of sense, but also
Correct.
understanding it's very difficult to consolidate lands, particularly with the high land value of property in the town. So that was done as an exercise to try and determine impacts.
So that's very helpful that you phrase it that way. It's also an indication that you can back into it the other way. In order to actually, you know, build it out, you're going to have to consolidate all these properties. So that just points to the, you know, the heavy lift that the town is going to have over, you know, with the development interest here. Those parcels that are on the east side of Upper King, there are a series of like 25 by 111 foot parcels there that you really can't do much with unless you actually consolidate those. So it would be interesting to, I guess, look at the study area and see what you could do. But there was actually only one, look at that area and study it, but there was only one parcel that I saw in that map that was not painted yellow, which is the one on Way Upper King, just south of Bischoff on the left on the railroad tracks, that long parcel there, which is a single parcel. And I did a quick study. You might be able to get, I don't know, 50 units on that because it's so long. And it's just wide enough to get some parking in there, behind it, where you could do, you could get some real development in there. And, that might be one of the areas which goes first. I don't know. But I have no idea. I have no information on landowners. I have no information. I'm over here in Millwood taking frequent naps. So I am completely out of the loop on all this stuff. But it's an interesting map to look at that and to realize that, yeah, it's going to take some real consolidation work for a lot of this to happen.
So may I
So
call
where do
for,
we go from
well,
here?
I just want to call for kind of wrapping it up. It's 8:27 and we promised that we'd keep these to 2
8:30.
hours. Felicia and I will consolidate the comments, maybe interject some of the conversation tonight. I think that each of you who have the points can further refine once we send the Word document around again. We will try to get that out to you by Monday.
Great.
And so you'll have that, but why don't we go ahead and set another meeting to review final changes, perhaps?
Thank you.
Your memo. And I would just ask that if you could all put your eyes on the track change document and get it to us at least a day or two before we meet so that we can give you a copy.
Taking the whole sport out of it.
Well, you know what? It's very, very difficult. We're trying to get 6:30 meetings. We have families to feed before the meeting. I mean, it's just,
Let them eat cake.
What?
Let them eat cake.
Let them eat cake. They would love it. But if everyone can look at their calendars, that would be helpful.
Yes.
So your next meeting, your planning board meeting is April
6th, right? April 6th?
Yes. And so I don't know if you want to carry over and meet that Thursday.
Can we, I think it's easier to have one a week, but that's just my opinion.
So there's April 1st, which is
Appropriately, yeah. So, thanks a lot, Sabrina.
I think
Now
that
we know what you think about our efforts.
said with the most love possible.
Well, that's also you're also coming up onto the holiday weekend too. So I don't think that's that great.
You can bump to the week after.
Yeah, I think that might be better to Kanan's point. There's
So
no better
April
way than to be here together on tax day, April 15th.
So what's it going to be?
April 15th, how is that? 6:30?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a month away, isn't it?
It is almost a month away, 4 weeks.
So it should give you plenty of time to put eyes on a track change document and get it to us in advance.
And get into them so it's prepared. Yep. So, by the way, so we have an April 15th date. Let's have all comments back to staff not later than April 8th. So they have a full week to look at it after the planning board meeting of April 6th.
So, yes, agreed. Just one last thing, Sabrina, I was looking for that. You said that there was a memo that we got from the meeting on the ARB.
Minutes. There are
The
minutes.
minutes were circulated.
Tom, I just sent it to you at the beginning of this meeting because you said you couldn't find it.
Thank you very much. I'll take a
So
look at
it's
that.
We're
I'm
on
gonna-
it like white on rice, guys.
Yeah, Alicia, you're great.
Thank you.
Or you are the best. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
And we will send an invitation to all of you for the special meeting and the reminder on the 8th to get your comments in.
Good. I think that would be good.
Okay.
Very good. Well, thanks, everyone.
All right, have a good
I
night.
guess we need, is there a motion to close the meeting since we're really in an official meeting?
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thanks so much,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.